Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready.
Today, we're going deep into the case of Richard Ramirez. Uh, the Night Stalker
Yeah.
terrorized California back in the 80s.
Right.
We're using the psychological profile. It was made by Joseph L. Martel.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to use it to figure out what drove him to do,
Yeah, what was going on in his head?
these horrific acts, what made him tick.
Exactly. We're not just listing the crimes.
Right.
It's more than that. We're going deeper.
Right.
Look into psychology, trying to figure out what factors might have
Right.
pushed him toward becoming a serial killer.
Well, and it's fascinating, right?
Absolutely.
But it's also terrifying at the same time. I mean, this case, it really...
Oh, for sure. It captivated the public
Yeah.
because it seemed so random.
Right.
His victims, I mean, anyone.
Yeah, his methods were brutal.
And just, like, why?
Yeah.
No motive, really.
Yeah, and that's the question, right? Everyone's wondering, who was this guy?
Right.
And what made him do it?
And that's the question we always ask with these kinds of cases.
Mm-hmm.
To really get it, we need to go back, like way back to the beginning, to his childhood.
To his childhood, yeah.
So Richard Ramirez, he was born in El Paso, Texas, youngest of 5 kids.
Okay.
Family was really poor, and there was physical abuse
Right.
and drugs around him from a young age. Tough start.
And so is that where this whole trauma control model comes in? The idea that
Yes.
trauma can really stick with you, and in some cases
Oh, absolutely. It can have a lasting impact for sure.
lead to, criminal behavior.
Right. So this model, basically, it says if someone is already predisposed to violence,
Okay.
whether it's, biological or social or psychological,
Yeah.
and then you add trauma on top of that, and
Ah.
it's a recipe for disaster. It can create a very volatile situation.
Okay, so how does this model apply to Ramirez specifically?
Okay, so we've got the abuse, the poverty,
Yeah.
but there's more. There's this other source of trauma. Okay, that's pretty significant. It's his cousin, Miguel.
Okay.
Now, Miguel was a Vietnam War vet, and he would share these really graphic stories
Oh, wow.
and images of, what happened during the war, the atrocities.
Like, he actually showed Ramirez photos of his victims.
Yes. He would brag about the women he'd raped and killed, even showed photos.
Wow.
I mean, can you imagine?
It's hard to even fathom the impact that would have, especially on, like,
A young mind.
a young, impressionable mind.
Exactly.
It's like his childhood was just set up to...
Yeah, a breeding ground for all the wrong influences.
Yeah.
Sadly, it gets even worse. So when Ramirez is 13,
Oh, gosh.
he sees Miguel kill his own wife.
Oh, my God.
Witnesses it.
That's awful.
And this event, it just kind of cements the connection between violence and power in his mind.
Wow. I mean, it's really hard to overstate just how disturbing that must have been.
Right. And it's likely these experiences had a huge impact on how he developed.
Yeah.
Around this time, he starts withdrawing, spending nights in cemeteries, fascinated by death.
Wow.
It's almost like he's trying to,
I don't understand it.
maybe even control the darkness that's all around him.
It's chilling, but it also, in a way, kind of makes sense.
How so?
Well, it's like he's trying to make sense of this chaos in his life.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
So by 16, Ramirez is already a pretty skilled burglar, stealing into,
Support his drug habit.
his cocaine addiction is growing.
Right.
He even got fired from a job at a Holiday Inn for trying to rape a guest.
Oh, wow. So the signs were there, right?
They were. It's heartbreaking because if someone had stepped in, intervened,
It could have been different.
maybe.
Yeah.
But sadly, those warning signs, they were missed or ignored.
Right.
And then June 28th, 1984, after
Yeah.
he'd been on a cocaine binge,
Right.
he commits his first known murder.
Yeah. A 79-year-old woman,
Yes,
he raped and stabbed her to death. Just brutal.
it was
And that was just the beginning, right?
the start of his reign of terror as the Night Stalker.
Yeah.
And it lasted over a year,
Over a year.
terrorizing California, using all these different methods: bludgeoning, stabbing, torture, mutilation, shooting.
Yeah.
It was horrifying. And what made it worse,
Was that there was no pattern.
exactly,
She's so
they
random.
target anyone, men, women, didn't matter how old they were,
Yeah.
kids, elderly people, different ethnicities. There was no pattern.
Right.
And that's what made him so terrifying.
It felt like anyone could be a target.
Exactly. And Martel's profile really suggests that Ramirez's early experiences, the trauma, all the violence,
Yeah.
it really shaped his behavior.
But how does someone go from those early experiences to being a serial killer? I mean,
That's a big leap.
Yeah, it seems like such a huge leap.
It is, and that's why we have to go deeper into the psychology.
Yeah.
So Martel diagnoses Ramirez with conduct disorder,
Okay.
and he points to specific criteria he met,
Right.
bullying, fighting, cruelty to animals. He was stealing things, setting fires.
Mm,
This is way beyond, like, typical teenage rebellion.
right. Yeah.
These are really serious issues.
That makes sense. Those are all pretty classic signs of someone who just doesn't care about rules or other people.
Right, a deep-seated disregard for others. And these behaviors, plus his lack of remorse,
Yeah.
they line up with what we see in a psychopathic offender,
It seemed like he really enjoyed the fear he caused.
which ultimately led to his capture on August 31st, 1985.
Right. A group of residents caught him while he was trying to steal a car.
Wow.
Yeah. They recognized him from his mugshot.
I mean, that's kind of poetic justice, isn't it?
It is, in a way.
The community he terrorized brought him down.
It shows how much of an impact he had on everyone
Yeah.
and how badly they wanted to stop him.
Yeah,
So anyway, he was convicted in 89, sentenced to death,
right.
and then he died in prison in 2013 from liver failure.
So that's the end of the story. But it still feels like we're left with so many questions, right? Like how much of his behavior was, his environment versus
Like something inside him, something he was born with.
the nature versus nurture debate.
Yeah.
It's really complicated, especially in a case like this.
Right.
It's impossible to know for sure. Like, what if his childhood had been different?
Yeah. Yeah.
But what we can do is look at the psychology,
Right.
trying to figure out what was going on there.
Okay. And so that's where these psychological constructs come in, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You
right.
mentioned those earlier?
Yeah, so these are based
I
on
don't fully get it.
Okay, think of them as like traits and qualities you can't see directly,
Oh, okay.
but they contribute to someone's behavior, like intelligence
What?
or motivation, anxiety,
Okay.
and in Ramirez's case, maybe this fascination with death and control.
Okay. That makes sense. So how do we apply that to Ramirez?
Well, remember how we were talking about his early fascination with death?
Yeah, spending nights in cemeteries and stuff.
Right. Drawn to all that.
It was like he was almost searching for darkness.
But why? That's the big question. Was it like a way to cope with his own fear? Feeling powerless? Did it give him like a sense of control
Right.
in a world where he felt out of control? Or was he looking for something? I don't know.
Yeah.
Some kind of meaning in death, trying to find where he belonged.
Those are some pretty big questions.
They are, and we can't really know for sure.
Yeah, I guess not.
That's the thing with criminal psychology.
Yeah.
It's frustrating and fascinating at the same time.
Yeah.
We can speculate, we can analyze, but we can't really get inside someone's head.
Right.
But we can look for patterns,
Yeah.
risk factors. And in this case,
Yeah.
his cousin, Miguel, we can't ignore that influence.
Right, because it wasn't just like the violence, right? It was the way he glorified it. Like it was something to admire.
Exactly. For Ramirez, all those stories, the photos,
Yeah.
it normalized that brutality.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the importance of early intervention.
Are you saying that if someone had stepped in, like recognized the warning signs,
Right.
gotten him help, maybe things would be different?
We can't say for sure, but it's definitely worth considering. That's why these prevention programs are so important.
Right.
If we can see these behaviors early on,
Yeah.
the aggression, cruelty, disregard for rules,
Right.
maybe we can intervene before it's too late.
It's almost like a pre-crime unit.
Okay.
But instead of predicting crime, we're trying to
Prevent it.
Yeah, prevent it by getting to the root of the problem.
Right, exactly. We're not talking about like punishing kids
No.
for what they might do in the future.
Right.
We're talking about helping them before they hurt themselves or others.
But isn't that like a really slippery slope?
How do you mean?
Well, who decides what behavior is like concerning?
It's a valid point.
And what about the kids who slip through the cracks even with our best efforts?
These are important concerns. And for sure, we need to be careful. There need to be ethical guidelines.
Right.
It's not about labeling every kid who acts out. It's about giving support
Yeah.
and resources to those who really need it. And yeah, sometimes things go wrong,
Right.
even when we try our best. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try.
Okay, so what would these prevention programs actually look like?
Well, depends on the community and the
Oh.
people involved.
Right, right.
But, I mean, some key things would be early childhood education programs,
Okay.
family counseling, mental health services, mentorship opportunities.
So it sounds like a lot of this is about creating a better environment for kids,
Yes.
especially those who are struggling.
A more supportive environment for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
And yeah, addressing things like poverty, access to education and healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
Those are really important too.
Yeah.
We need kids to feel safe,
Right.
valued, supported, to have what they need to succeed.
It makes you think, how many more cases like Richard Ramirez could we prevent
Yeah.
if we really invested in these programs?
That's the question, isn't it? As a society, how much are we willing to invest in our kids?
Yeah,
Because doing nothing, that's the real cost.
that's a great point. And it's not just about stopping crime, right? It's about making a better world for everyone. But then there's accountability, right? What about people who commit these awful crimes?
Yeah.
Like Ramirez. How do we balance punishment
Yeah.
with understanding that, well, their actions are often because of their environment?
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer.
I mean, it feels like we're dealing with some really big stuff here.
Yeah.
Like the nature of evil,
Right.
the impact of trauma,
Mm.
personal responsibility. It's a lot.
It is. And there's no like easy answers or solutions. But I think
Yeah.
the more we understand about what leads to violence,
Right.
the better we'll be able to address it. It's about finding that balance
Mhm.
between accountability, but also understanding.
So going back to Richard Ramirez, after all this, what are the key takeaways from this whole deep dive?
Well, I think the biggest thing
Yeah.
is that link between his awful childhood
Right.
and how brutal he became. I mean,
Yeah.
the abuse, seeing all that violence,
Yeah.
nobody stepping in to help,
Yeah.
it all contributed to his psychopathy.
It's like that recipe for disaster we were talking about, right?
Exactly.
You take a kid who's already vulnerable,
Yeah.
expose them to all that
Some
trauma,
violence. Yeah.
and then don't give them any support.
No guidance.
It's tragic, but it also,
It highlights how important prevention is.
yeah, how urgent it is.
Exactly. And prevention, it takes a lot of forms. It starts with creating safe environments for kids.
Yeah,
Places where they feel supported. So that means tackling poverty,
right.
making sure they have good education and health care,
Yeah.
and building strong families and communities. We need to intervene early. Give those at-risk youth resources and support
Yeah.
before it's too late.
It's not just about punishing people after they've committed a crime.
Right.
It's about stopping them from getting to that point.
It's about creating a world where violence isn't the answer.
Exactly.
We got to shift our focus from just punishing people
Right.
to rehabilitating them. We need to invest in programs that get to the root of the problem,
Mm-hmm.
like poverty, mental illness,
Yeah.
substance abuse.
Okay, but what about individual responsibility?
Mhm.
Someone like Richard Ramirez,
Yeah,
who did such horrible things,
Right.
can they ever really be rehabilitated?
that is a tough one.
Yeah.
There isn't a simple answer. I mean,
Yeah.
some people, maybe they can change,
Yeah.
others maybe not. But no matter what,
Yeah.
we need a system that's both fair and compassionate,
Right.
holds people accountable, but also recognizes
Yeah.
that there are all these factors that influence their behavior.
That's a lot to ask.
It is.
But I think, the more we learn about how our minds work, the closer we can get to finding that balance.
I agree. Knowledge is power. And in this case,
Yeah.
it could actually save lives.
Well, we've covered a lot today. I mean,
Oh,
we've
yeah.
been to some dark places
Sure.
trying to understand Ramirez's mind.
Trying to make sense of it all.
But we've also talked about,
Yeah.
prevention, rehabilitation.
Hope for the future.
Yeah, it's been chilling, but also,
Thought-provoking.
yeah, definitely thought-provoking.
The case of Richard Ramirez really shows us how devastating violence can be
Mm-hmm.
and how important it is to understand, to intervene,
Yeah.
and to have compassion.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It was a pleasure.
I hope you all learned something and that you'll think about the things we talked about what leads to criminal behavior and how we can create a better world for everyone.
A more just world.
Yeah, a more just and compassionate world. Remember, even when things seem really dark,
Yeah.
there's always hope.